I have the pleasure once again of introducing a returning facilitator. Hopefully you've had a chance to see her on previous Flow Friday presentations, Tisa Silver Canady. And she will be talking about borrowing while Black. And I encourage everyone to take good notes. And please, as mentioned, put your questions in the chat. We'll be providing this presentation for the next 14 days, the recording of it for the next 14 days. So Tisa, feel free to take it away.
All right. Thank you so much, Charles, for having me. And thank you all for joining me this homecoming week at Howard University. I know you've got plenty of options as for what you could be doing. So I really appreciate you all being here with me today. So today's topic is Borrowing While Black, which is actually the title of a book that I released in 2020. So I want to talk a bit about my own personal history with higher education, then Borrowing While Black, what led me to write the book and the contents. Then I want to shift gears a bit and talk about current events, because there has been a lot going on in the world of student loans lately. And it's really important for everyone to know their options for relief and be in a position to take advantage of those benefits before they disappear. And lastly, I have some content that's geared more toward current students or people who are thinking about returning to school. So we'll talk a bit about strategies to increase your higher education ROI, or return on investment. So this is actually a picture of me at the University of Delaware back in, I'm not going to say the year, but it was in the late 90s when I was a freshman on campus and had made a pretty much almost purely financial decision to go to the university that gave me the most money. So I was able to get a full academic scholarship to the University of Delaware. And after taking the SAT in the 7th grade at the behest of an extremely forward-looking principal, I started to learn more about not necessarily college as a possibility, but the possibility of someone else paying for me to go to college as a possibility. So I struck a deal with my parents and I asked them if I got a full scholarship, would they take the money that they had saved for me to go to college and instead buy me a car with it? And they said yes, and that's all I needed to hear. I was on a mission to get that scholarship. So I was very pleased to be able to go to the University of Delaware on a full ride. Unfortunately, after I got there, I came up against Math 241 and some other subjects with 200 or 300 people in the classroom. Really thought that I was just going to push through it and figure it out on my own like I always had to that point, and things didn't go my way. And within 1 year of starting there, I found myself on academic probation. Ended up losing my scholarship, changing a major, taking an extra year to graduate. Along the way, had some financial pitfalls, but eventually landed on my feet and figured out that higher education was the space I wanted to work in. So my education, actually formal education, was just finished in 2017 when I earned my doctorate from Morgan State University. So borrowing while Black, I didn't have a lot of experience with student loans during undergrad. I had to take one student loan after I had lost my scholarship. And thankfully, my father was kind enough to take care of that loan for me. And I know that I'm extremely blessed in that regard. But there are many other people who don't have that support or someone to help them and take care of their debt. So the inspiration for borrowing while Black wasn't necessarily from my own experience. It actually came up during a Twitter chat with a student from Howard University at the time. This might have been back in 2018 or 2019. We were both watching a special on BET that was about student loan debt. And the student reached out to me and said she'd found me and she wanted to know if I had any resources that were geared towards students. And I honestly could not think of anything. I had some content that I'd created, but it was not specifically speaking to the experience of Black borrowers. So I took what she said to heart, did some research, found scholarly research out there, but did not find anything that was anything much that was geared towards students and helping them be more strategic about their use of loans on their higher education journey. So I decided to write Borrowing While Black. Even though the recommendations that are in the book are geared toward Black borrowers, the information is valid across races, ethnicities, all of that. So the recommendations are not just for Black borrowers. Any borrower can benefit from them, but I believe that Black borrowers stand to gain the most from putting the recommendations into practice. So as I was writing the book, it happened to be at a time when my mother's health was declining. But I wanted to ask her as many questions as possible before she transitioned. And a lot of our conversations revolved around higher education. So this is a picture of my mother, Sherilyn Smith Silver, who was the first generation college student and graduated from Virginia State University in the class of 1969. And she was also the director of general accounting at Howard University for many years before retiring in 2005. When I asked her about how she paid for college, given that neither one of her parents had completed high school, she said she had to take out one student loan that might have been about $900. So it wasn't a really high burden to pay off, but she worked a lot of summers. She really found that she was on her own quite a bit when it came to filling out the applications and figuring out how she was going to pay the bill, but she made it work. On the other end of the spectrum, we have my father, Ezel Silver Jr. Unlike my mother, who grew up in basically a rural kind of truck stop town in Virginia, my father actually grew up in Newark, New Jersey, in a single parent household, living in the projects initially. He was also a first generation college student and graduate, and he chose to go to Howard University and graduated in the class of 1970 with a degree in electrical engineering. For Dad, he relied heavily on my grandmother, who worked part-time as a LPN in a hospital, but also sold Avon and used a lot of her earnings from Avon to put my father through college, even when he took extra time. And because of what she did for him and his own working during the summers and breaks, he was able to graduate from Howard University debt-free. But we all know the times and costs have changed. Before I get into how things have changed, I just wanted to revisit the history a bit, because I've noticed that whenever I talk about this subject, borrowing while Black, there are some people out there who want to jump in and say, well, why does everything have to be about race? And my answer is that until the numbers tell me otherwise, that's what it's going to be about. And in this case, there's so many factors that lead to the experiences of Black borrowers being different from those of other borrowers. And we've heard this notion for many years of separate but equal, but we know that that's not the case. So I just wanted to show everyone this picture. This one-room schoolhouse is actually where my mother went to elementary school with students of all grades. It's called the Jericho School. Served African-American school children in the Ruther Glen, Virginia community, grades 1 through 7, but it operated in Caroline County, Virginia until 1959. So I'm not sure how old everyone is, but you might have been here by 1959. We're not talking about, the 1600s or the 1700s. There are people still living that went through this kind of experience. So we know that, again, there are lots of factors that contribute to the experiences of Black borrowers and Black college students being different from those of other races and ethnicities. So I want to go through some of the selected outcomes from the book. In summary, Black students tend to borrow more often. They also tend to borrow more overall, graduate less often, earn less upon graduation, and default more often. So when you combine all of those factors together, this is not a formula that leads to wealth and opportunity. In many cases, it's one that leads to burdens that make people feel as though they have lost their freedom to some degree. So we're going to go through each of these outcomes from the book and then talk about some strategies to combat the outcomes, as well as some of the current relief options that are available for student borrowers now. So that first outcome is borrowing more often. Here I have 85% of Black bachelor's degree recipients borrow student loans versus 69% of white students and 66% of Latino students. Our Black students are more likely to come from lower income households. And unfortunately, the assistance that's offered by the Pell Grant program, the Pell Grant, of course, is a source of funding that doesn't have to be paid. That Pell Grant has failed to keep pace with the cost of college and also failed to keep pace with inflation. So more students are turning to student loans to cover the gaps in their cost of attendance. The second stat is about borrowing more overall. Black graduates with bachelor's degree owe approximately $7,400 more in student debt on average, upon graduation than their white counterparts. For some people, they might see $7,400 and think that's not that big of a deal. And I think it is, but everything is relative. But something else that is alarming to me is the difference in that gap and how it grows over time. So just 4 years post-graduation, the average amount of debt for a white graduate is approximately $28,006. For a Black graduate, that number is $52,726. There are several reasons that could go into why that gap exists, but you start with a gap at graduation, and then 4 years later, you see that gap has grown even larger and contributes to us not being able to build wealth like some other people have the opportunity to. Our next outcome is graduating less often, and we're looking at 6-year college completion rates here. Among students who started in 4-year public institutions, Black students had the lowest 6-year completion rate, and that sits below 50%. This is actually from 2018, so it's a bit outdated. We'll have to take a look at the numbers to see, how they have changed over the years, and also the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic. But I just wanted to pause for a moment to be very clear that in sharing these outcomes, I'm in no way saying or implying that Black students don't have the ability to get through college. There are just some circumstances, some things that they're experiencing that contribute to the failure to complete, but it's not for lack of ability. It's not for a lack of drive or talent. Sometimes there are other factors like finances that get in the way and drive that failure to complete. The next one is earning less upon graduation. And this quote here says, young Black graduates face a 16.8% pay penalty relative to their white counterparts, and the wage penalty is often larger for Black women. This is something that it still surprises me when people try to deny the fact that this wage gap exists. And I think 16.8% is actually an understatement. But the bottom line is that when you have a greater debt and you have fewer earnings to draw on to pay for that debt, that puts you in a situation where that debt is basically primed to grow instead of decrease over time because you have less income available to pay it back. And the last income has to do with student loan default. Student loan default is a condition of a loan that happens after a borrower has not made payments for at least 9 months. And being in default has severe consequences. Of course, it's damaging to your personal credit. It's also it can cause you to have your transcripts withheld, meaning that you wouldn't be able to provide proof that you completed an academic program if you were applying for a job that required academic transcripts. It can lead to your wages being garnished, Social Security benefits being seized, tax refunds being seized, and a host of other penalties that further rob people of the opportunity to earn money and build wealth. So, for Black borrowers, those who graduated with a bachelor's degree, they defaulted on their student loans nearly 5 times as often as their white peers. And furthermore, Black college graduates were more likely to default than white students who dropped out of college. So when you look at these outcomes, particularly this one, for me, it's impossible to ignore race. There are a lot of factors that contribute to this situation, but this is just so clear that there's something different about the Black borrowing experience. And to know that so many people are experiencing the consequences of default is just, it's very unfortunate to say the least. So this clip is actually pulled from an article that came out of the Wall Street Journal last year. I just pulled one quote here. It says, Black students were told that college was a path to wealth and prosperity. Instead, student loans have become a millstone around the neck of an entire generation. And I know so many people who feel that way. And just in this past year, with all that's been going on with student loans, people seem to be opening up more about their experiences and sharing them and realizing that they're not alone in this struggle. And in my work with one-on-one student loan advising, I find that a lot of these sessions are almost like therapy because it's not just the numbers that we're sorting through. Sometimes it's the guilt or the shame associated with not being able or feeling like they're not able to repay a debt or for having taken out so much debt in the first place. So there's lots of issues that we have to work through in addition to the finances. And I'm just happy to be in a position to be able to help people with that. So speaking of help, now that we've got those outcomes out of the way, I want to talk to you about some of the relief programs that had come up to help student loan borrowers work through their debts. So the first one that I wanted to talk to you all about is the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan that was announced on August the 24th. This plan came about as a result of a lot of advocacy on behalf of student loan borrowers, and some of it from student loan borrowers themselves. So the plan offers up to $20,000 for most federal student loan borrowers. There are some who will currently be excluded. So I wanted to share with you all kind of my personal checklist of how to determine if you're eligible, and if you are eligible, how to determine how much relief you can receive. So I'm going to walk you through a series of questions. There are 5 altogether to determine your eligibility for up to $20,000 worth of student loan cancellation. Quick note before I go through the questions. This cancellation is not, it's not cash. So nobody's going to receive a handout, a check, or anything like that. This cancellation will be applied to your existing student loan balance. So if you owe $50,000 and it turns out that you're eligible for $20,000, once you've applied and it's processed, you'll see your balance decrease to $30,000. So no cash will be received. You'll just see it as a reduction of your existing student loan balance. So let's start with the eligibility questions, and we'll walk through each of these questions in greater detail in the forthcoming slides. So the first question is, are your loans federally held? You can go to studentaid.gov to verify, and I'll give you the exact steps on the next screen to verify what it means to be federally held. I can tell you, though, that if your loans have been included in the CARES Act forbearance that started on March 13, 2020, your loans are indeed federally held. There's a small group of people, relatively small, about 700,000 to 800,000 people out of the more than 44 million that have federal student loan debt. That group of people will not qualify for relief through this program at this particular time. And we'll talk about the details in just a minute. The second question is, were your loans dispersed before June 30th of 2022? If the answer is yes to that question and the loans are federally held, we'll move on to question number 3. Question number 3 has to do with an income cap. This plan was meant to help people who are who make less than a certain amount. I don't want to put the labels out there wealthy, because I think that the definition that we use with that just is not accurate in many cases when it comes to plans like this. So there's an income cap, and it's going to be looking at the years 2020 or 2021. If you are a single tax filer, or if you are married but choose to file separately, your AGI needs to have been under $125,000 for either 2020 or 2021. If you are a married borrower that files jointly, or you're head of household, then the income cap would rise to $250,000. If you answer yes to all 3 of those questions, then you should be eligible for up to $10,000 worth of one-time cancellation through the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. As an additional layer of relief, Pell Grant borrowers are treated differently. There's the opportunity to gain another $10,000 of cancellation. So you need to know if you received a Pell Grant, and you can verify that information, again, at studentaid.gov. If you have received the Pell Grant, there's just one final question. That question has to do with the kinds of loans you have, and if the loans that you have for your own education exceed $10,000. If the balance on the loans you took out for your own education exceeds $10,000 and you are a Pell Grant recipient, then you should be eligible for up to $20,000 in relief. Okay. So this is just kind of like a checklist. If you want to share this with anyone else, this is just to help people arrive at a clear answer about their current eligibility. So let's take a look. Before we take a look at each of the questions in detail, I just wanted to share, I'm sure many of you know because the news spread like wildfire, but the application for relief is available now. You can go to studentaid.gov/debt relief to complete the application. It is very quick, and I highly recommend completing it as soon as possible. Okay. So let's walk through the questions one by one. The first question is, are your loans federally held? If your loans were included in that payment pause that we've been in since March 13th of 2020, then your loans are federally held. If you're still unsure about whether your loans are federally held, you can log into studentaid.gov. You're going to come to a place called the dashboard. Then there'll be an opportunity for you to view your servicer details. What you look for is the mark of the Department of Education. So when you see the name of your servicer, it should say Department of Ed / and then the name of the servicer. So in this example, the servicer is Nelnet. If you see Department of Ed / Nelnet, that lets you, or any other servicer preceded by Department of Ed, that lets you know that the loan is a federally held student loan and would qualify for this particular form of relief. Student loans that are in default can also qualify, whether they're Stafford loans, PLUS loans, or Perkins loans. If your loans are not held by the Department of Education, then you have what's called a commercially held FFEL loan. So if you log in and look at your loan types and you see FFEL or FFELP, it could be a commercially held FFEL loan. Unfortunately, at this time, commercially held FFEL loans are not eligible for relief through this plan. When the plan was announced initially, there was an opportunity for people who had these commercially held FFEL loans to consolidate their loans and gain access to this one-time cancellation benefit. However, since the announcement came out, there have been some lawsuits filed. And on September the 29th, the Department of Education updated their website to say that people who had not consolidated before the day before, September 29th, they would no longer be able to consolidate those commercially held FFEL loans and gain access to this one-time cancellation. So for right now, if you have those commercially held FFEL loans, they are not eligible. I hope that the legal issues will be worked through and that at some opportunity, there will be a chance for people with commercially held FFEL loans to gain access to this program. But also important to remember, 44 plus million plus people have federal student loans. Commercially held FFEL loans are held, I think, exclusively about between 700 and 800,000 people. Still a large number of people, but relative to the number of federal student loans that are out there, that group is small. All right, so the second question is, were your loans dispersed before June 30th of 2022? You can log into studentaid.gov and view the disbursement dates for your loan by following these clicks here. You would go to My Aid, then View Details, then View Breakdown, and then View Loans. From there, you can see a history of all of your federal student loans, and you can look to see if they were dispersed before June 30th of 2022. If you've been out of school for a while, you don't need to check this, but there's some people who are current students or incoming students who might be a bit confused about when the cutoff is for who's eligible. So if someone was starting college for the first time in the fall semester of 2022, they would not be eligible for cancellation through this program because it's limited to those who had loans dispersed before June 30th of 2022. Additionally, if you are a person who consolidated your loans after June 30th of 2022, then the Department of Education is said to be looking at your original loans disbursement date. So they won't hold that date against you. They'll just go back and look at the disbursement dates of the original loans that you placed into the consolidation loan. Okay, so June 30th was the deadline. Question 3, is your 2020 or 2021 adjusted gross income under the income cap? You can find your adjusted gross income on your personal income tax form, personal income tax return, which is Form 1040 on line 11. Quick note about the application. You're not actually required to provide your adjusted gross income. You are just required to attest that your income in at least one of those years did fall under the income cap. So you don't have to provide any documentation. You just have to attest that you meet this income cap and that if you're not telling the truth, there could be a penalty. All right, question number 4, did you receive a Pell Grant? If you log into studentaid.gov and take a look at the My Aid screen, usually you will see a blue kind of wheel that has your loan balance in the middle. If you received the Pell Grant, you'll see both wheels next to each other. One's blue, one's green. The green wheel has your grants, the record of your grants received, that total balance in the middle. And if you see Pell Grant there, that means you received a Pell Grant. Many times people have questions about the Pell Grant, like, did I have to receive more than $5,000 worth of Pell? The answer is no. There is no dollar threshold. Also, some people want to know, did I have to get a Pell Grant every year that I was in school? The answer is no. There's no frequency requirement. If you receive any Pell Grant, even if it was just one, then that's okay. Also, there's some people that received Pell Grants during their undergraduate experience, but did not borrow loans at that time. But when they went back to school for another degree, they borrowed student loans. So the Pell Grant and the student loans were not taken out during the same educational experience. That's okay too. It does not matter. If you received a Pell Grant and you have student loans, then you would satisfy the eligibility requirement for this question. Also, to people who went to school a little bit before I did, if you received a Pell Grant, sometimes that information will not display in studentaid.gov, depending on the year that you went. So if you received one prior to 1994, you will not see it within studentaid.gov, but that does not mean that federal student aid has no record of your Pell Grant. It's just not available for viewing in studentaid.gov. Right, and the fifth question is your balance on loans borrowed for your own education greater than $10,000? The reason that this question is included is because there is a line drawn between people who have taken out student loans for themselves and people who have borrowed student loans for their child's education. Those are called Parent Plus loans. If you have both types of loans, you would need for the balance on your own student loans to be greater than $10,000 in order for you to qualify for that increased benefit of $20,000. The maximum benefit that a person who has Parent Plus loans only can receive is $10,000. It doesn't matter if the parent received a Pell Grant during their own undergraduate experience. If the only loans they have are Parent Plus loans, then the maximum amount of cancellation through this plan is $10,000. However, if you have student loans that you took out for your own education and Parent Plus loans that you took out for your child, you could be eligible for up to $20,000 if you received a Pell Grant, and the balance that you owe on your own student loans exceeds $10,000. Another common question I get about this plan is, well, what if I owe $18,000? Well, if you owe 18 and you meet all of the eligibility requirements, including having received a Pell Grant, then 18 will be canceled. They will not give you a refund for the extra $2,000. They will just cancel your debt all the way up to $20,000. So in no way is anyone going to receive cash. It's just a reduction of your existing student loan balance as long as you meet the eligibility criteria. So the application for relief is available. It's open and it's set to remain open until December 31st of 2023. Even though it's set to be available that long, I would encourage you to apply for it right away. The Department of Education has said that it should take about 6 weeks to process the cancellation after you apply. So if you want to have your balance reflect the cancellation before repayment resumes early next year, it's recommended that you complete the application no later than November 15th of this year. The payment pause is set to end on December 31st of this year. So if you want to go into the new year with your student loan balance reflecting this one-time cancellation, you should apply by November the 15th. That way you'll give yourself the 6-week window for the relief to be processed. And by the time you enter repayment, you should have your new and lower loan balance. So just wanted to share this as well. If there's anyone who's interested in opting out, you need to contact your student's loan servicer by November 14th. And when I share that, sometimes people say, well, why would anyone want to opt out? Well, in some states, this cancellation might be treated as taxable income, and some people don't want the tax burden. They also might be eligible for relief through another program, such as public service loan forgiveness, which is tax-free. So they don't want the tax burden, or in some cases, this cancellation could be treated as income that pushes someone out of eligibility for other benefits, like perhaps food assistance. So for some people, they might not want to take advantage of this because of the other penalties that might come about at the state level. Also, some borrowers will automatically receive relief. People who have completed a FAFSA within the past couple of years, the Department of Education already has their income information, contact information. So it's possible that they can receive automatic relief. From what I'm hearing, people are receiving emails to say that that is the case and that if they want to opt out, they should by November 14th, 2022. So the application, again, if you visit studentaid.gov/debt relief or the longer link that's listed here, you can access the application and you should be able to complete it in less than 5 minutes. The application does not require you to log into studentaid.gov or to even have an FSA account. It just requires your name, your date of birth, your social security number, your phone number, your email address, and then you have to check a box, basically attesting to the fact that you meet one of the requirements associated with the income cap. Once you put in that information, you're done. So if you have not completed that application already, I strongly encourage you to complete it as soon as possible. Okay. So there are other programs that are available for student loan relief, and these are more targeted programs. The Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan is one that is far-reaching. It's going to cover most federal student loan borrowers, and that's why it's so important for people to apply for that ASAP. But there are other programs that offer targeted forms of relief. One of those programs is Borrower Defense to Repayment. Borrower Defense to Repayment is a program that's available for people who attended schools that in some way violated rules that are out there from the Department of Education. This could be deceptive practices around reporting job placements and outcomes. There's a lengthy list of things that the schools could do, but if a school is found to have committed any of those errors, or if a borrower believes that the school committed that error, they can apply for borrower defense. The Borrower Defense to Repayment program has been in existence for many years, but the previous administration just really did not act on it. Things kind of came to a halt, but with the Biden administration, activity has picked up, and there's an opportunity for people to get some movement on their applications for relief because of some resolutions to some lawsuits. So you can take a look at the list of schools at studentaid.gov on their borrower defense page. There should be a link to a list of schools that are included in this expanded opportunity to apply for borrower defense. It doesn't mean that your request will be approved, but never have I seen an opportunity like this where so many schools are on the list as having possibly made these violations and thereby opening up the door for people to apply for relief. The next type of relief is total and permanent disability discharge. This is the option for people to have their debts totally canceled due to their disability. This is something that has to be documented. It also has an application process. But if you find yourself in a situation where you are unable to work or earn income because of a severe disability, you should definitely explore this option. I helped someone complete an application for this maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago. And it involves submitting some information about your condition or proof that you're receiving disability benefits from Social Security. But if you're no longer able to earn the income, that's of course going to hamper your ability to pay the student debt. And if you do meet the conditions, then you should apply to have that debt discharged. There's also options to have debt discharged for schools who have closed. There are several schools that are included in that as well, but for many of you who go to schools like Howard University or public institutions or many of the private nonprofits, they're staying open. So this is really an option that's not really widely available because there are not many schools that are closing. Lastly, there is a temporary halt right now on the taxation of federal student loan debt cancellation. This is more in reference to borrowers who have been pursuing cancellation through income-driven repayment plans. They require you to make payments for 20 or 25 years. And at the end of that term, the debt is supposed to be canceled. That cancellation has not been working. So the Department of Education is looking at borrowers' accounts to assess where they are in terms of meeting that 20 or 25-year repayment term, and to give them credit for periods where they may not have received credit in the past. This is a one-time review called the IDR waiver, and it's supposed to begin happening this fall. Now, another program that offers targeted relief is public service loan forgiveness. And I'm going to give you a lot of information on public service loan forgiveness in the coming slides, because there's a really important deadline coming up for the public service loan forgiveness program. Now, this program has been in existence since 2007. However, the acceptance rate for the program had been about 2% up until the fall of 2021, because borrowers had to meet a lot of requirements in addition to having student loans and working for qualifying public service employers. But the gist of it is the original PSLF program had a 98% rejection rate. The program had 5 requirements for borrowers. Last year, on October the 6th, the Biden administration announced something called the limited PSLF waiver, which is a temporary relaxation of the rules that took the requirements down from 5 to 2. The 2 remaining requirements are that borrowers have to have 120 periods of repayment. A period of repayment is a month when your loan was in a repayment status. It doesn't mean you had to actually make a payment. It just means that your loan had to be in a repayment status. And during the times when your loans were in a repayment status, you had to be working full-time for a public service employer. Now, there's still lots of gray area within both of those. So I'm going to talk a bit about more of what these 2 requirements mean, but I just really want everyone to keep in mind the deadline of October 31st. Because the PSLF program will be around after October 31st, but the original rules will be restored. And those are the same rules that produced a 98% rejection rate. So the PSLF waiver is a time-sensitive opportunity. With all of public service loan forgiveness, it's only looking at your history after October 1st, 2007, because that's when the law went into effect. So at this point, we have about 15 years worth of repayment history and loan status history to be examined. And if you are a person who has worked for a public service employer for all of that time, and you've had loans in repayment for all of that time, it could be possible for you to put in this application and have your debt canceled, because you've met the requirements of having qualifying employment and loans that were in a repayment status. But you will never know if you do not submit the PSLF application by October 31st, specifically because the more relaxed rules are in place. You can apply after October 31st, but the more strict rules will be applied to your application. So there are 4 steps to apply for public service loan forgiveness. The first one is to, of course, confirm your employer's eligibility, because without working for an eligible employer, access to the loan forgiveness would not be available. So first, you want to confirm your employer eligibility for each employer that you've worked for after October 1st of 2007, knowing that the months that will be counted are those where you had the qualifying employment and when you had loans that were in a repayment status. The second step is to know your loans. And for this, you'll log into studentaid.gov and take a look at your loan types to make sure that the types of loans you have do qualify for PSLF. The third step is a decision point. Some people are going to have to consolidate if they want their loans to be considered for PSLF. And if they want access to PSLF through the waiver, they need to file a consolidation application by October 31st of this year as well. The fourth and final step is to do something called certifying your employment. This is actually completing the application for PSLF. It serves as documentation of your employment, which can then be reviewed against your repayment history to see if you've met that 120-month requirement. So let's walk through these steps. So to confirm your employer eligibility, you need their employer ID number, and you can find that on your W-2. If you don't have a W-2 nearby, some people are able to Google and find the employer ID numbers pretty easily. You just want to make sure that it matches the organization that you work for, so that the records, your W-2 and your application align. So you want to visit studentaid.gov/PSLF. And when you're there, you're going to see prompts directing you to something called the PSLF Help Tool. But underneath the start button for the help tool is a button that says search for qualifying employers. This is where you want to enter the employer ID number to find out if your employer is considered as one that is eligible for PSLF. So after you have after you enter the EIN, the search is going to yield one of the following results. It could be eligible, likely ineligible, ineligible, or no results. I've also seen some come back as undetermined. But if your organization shows up as eligible, as an example, I'll use Howard University. Howard University is a private nonprofit university, and it is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. So it would be a qualifying employer for the purposes of PSLF. If your organization is likely ineligible, that means your employer isn't recognized as a government agency or a 501c3 nonprofit organization. However, if your organization, your employer is a tax-exempt organization and it engages in work, including what the Department of Education calls qualifying services to the public, and there's a list of those services at studentaid.gov/PSLF, you could still apply and just provide documentation to support your claim that the employer should be eligible for the purposes of PSLF. And if you're able to sway them, that means that other people who apply after you wouldn't have to go through all of that to make the case because you've done it for them. If the organization comes up as ineligible, that means the Department of Education has determined that the employer does not qualify for PSLF. If you really think your organization should qualify and it is a nonprofit organization that provides qualifying services to the public, you might still want to try to make the case because maybe they've changed the way they do business over the years. Some organizations have converted from being for-profit to being nonprofit, and perhaps those records weren't updated yet. That's not something that's happening frequently, but it's a possibility, and it would be up to you to make the case for it. And the last option here is no results. That means your employer is just not in the database at all. So if it's a relatively new organization that's 501c3, then perhaps it's just not in there yet. But with no results, you can still manually add an employer and provide documentation to make the case that the employer should be eligible for public service loan forgiveness. But if you're a Howard University employee, Howard University qualifies, public higher ed institutions, public K through 12 schools, there are many organizations that qualify for public service loan forgiveness. And in terms of the employment, good things to remember is that you don't have to stay with the same employer for the entire time. That's not a requirement of the program. What's required is that you work in the realm of public service, which includes all government agencies and 501c3 nonprofit organizations, with the exception of just a few like labor unions and partisan political organizations. But if you're in the realm of public service, even if you switch employers, that employment can still count. The employment also needs to be direct employment. So you would receive a W-2 instead of a 1099. If you're a contractor, the employment does not qualify. Last note about the employment. Full-time means that you are full-time by definition of your employer, or you work a minimum of 30 hours per week on average. So if you are an adjunct instructor and you have multiple appointments, if all of your appointments are at schools that are qualifying employers, you could combine those part-time jobs together to meet the definition of what it means to be full-time employee. So as I explain more of this, I think it's becoming more clear as to why this program had a 98% rejection rate under the original rules. There's just lots and lots of stipulations that apply to each of the program's requirements. So step one, confirm your employer eligibility. Step 2 is to know your loan types. You can see your loan types by logging into studentaid.gov, and in the My Aid section, you want to click on View Details. So if you go to View Details and scroll down to the loan types, you're going to see each category of loans. Like this example, you have 3 unsubsidized loans. Next to the dollar balance, you want to click on the little drop down arrow to expand the list. And then you'll be able to see the loan types that you have, and specifically the loans that you have with outstanding balances. So in this case, we're looking at a borrower who has both FFEL loans and a direct loan. The direct loan has a 0 balance. The FFEL loans still have balances. Public service loan forgiveness is for direct loans only. So if you log into your account and you see that you have FFELP loans, those FFELP loans must be consolidated if you want them to be considered for PSLF. And you should consolidate them by October 31st of this year if you want to receive the maximum amount of credit possible toward PSLF. So if PSLF is something that you're serious about pursuing and you have FFELP loans, you have to consolidate them to get them in the pipeline. If your loans are direct, they do not have to be consolidated because direct loans are already qualifying for PSLF. Step 3 is a decision point. You have to decide if you are going to consolidate. Consolidation just takes one or more existing federal student loans and combines the loans into a new direct consolidation loan. So if you just have one FFELP loan out there, you can consolidate it and it will become a direct loan. If you have FFELP loans and direct loans out there, you can combine those together and the combined loans will become a direct consolidation loan. Now, under the original rules of PSLF, this is before the waiver, and this is what will happen after the waiver. If you consolidate your loans outside of the waiver, you're basically, none of your repayment history on the loans will count toward PSLF. That will be wiped out and you'll be starting over with your first payment as number 1. And this is meaning number 1 on the way to 120 for PSLF. So that's what would happen if you consolidated before the waiver or after the waiver. And for that reason, many people with FFELP loans didn't consolidate. They just were kind of scared to start over and weren't sure if they were going to work and be able to make payments for another 10 years. So they stayed put. But with the limited waiver, that rule has changed. What's happening now is if you consolidate your loans, the consolidation loan will be credited with at least the largest number of payments on the loans that were consolidated. So if you had, in this example, a FFELP loan, which is older and has 100 months of repayment history, and the direct loan, which is more recent and has 50 months of repayment history, through the waiver, you can combine these two together and the entire direct consolidation loan will be given credit for the larger number, which is 100 months. This is provided that you have the qualifying employment for all of those months. But the point is, if you have FFELP loans and you want them to be considered for PSLF, you have to consolidate them. And if you consolidate them before the waiver expires, then your repayment history on those FFELP loans can be treated as qualifying for PSLF. After the waiver expires, this will not happen. If this same situation, if this particular borrower was in the exact same situation, but they were looking at this on November the 1st of this year, then that direct consolidation loan would start with 0 qualifying payments toward PSLF. And that's the difference a day makes, okay? So if you're interested in PSLF, you have FFELP loans, then you'd want to consolidate them before October the 31st or by October the 31st to make sure that they are included in consideration for PSLF, but under the rules of the limited waiver. All right, step 4 is to certify your employment. This is the actual PSLF application. And if you're going through this process, you will probably find that the PSLF application is actually the easiest part of this. The PSLF application itself is really an employment certification. It's just you providing proof of your employment and having someone from the employer, from the organization, sign off that what you said is true. So you can complete the PSLF application by visiting studentaid.gov/PSLF and logging in. I highly recommend that you use the PSLF help tool. The PSLF help tool is an online platform that allows you to enter the employer's EIN, and it populates the form based on the information that's in the database. You will have to provide details about your employment, including your start date, your end date, the average number of hours you work per week, and whether you are a full-time or part-time employee. That information is put into the form, and it produces a PDF that you download, you sign it, and then you get the employer to verify. Once you've completed that, you would send it off to the servicer, which is a company now called Mohila, and you would be in the pipeline to have your application considered under the rules of the limited waiver, as long as you complete the PSLF help tool process by October the 31st. Quick note about this. I've been telling people since this waiver came out, get your applications in, get them signed and in by October 31st. In recent weeks, really just about a week and a half ago, I was reading something that said that it's the PSLF help tool piece that has to be completed by October 31st. And that if you send in a form after the 31st, that would be okay as long as the PSLF help tool piece was completed by October 31st. I've read it, but I got to tell you, when it comes to these limited opportunities like this, I would just want to get everything in. So if you are able to get the form, the help tool piece of it completed and signed by October 31st, then good for you. That's what I would do personally. But I have seen the language out there from the Department of Education to say that if you're unable to get someone to sign it by October 31st, you can submit the form to Mohila after that date, as long as you've had the PSLF help tool piece of it completed by the 31st, okay? Some tips for completing the application. To get the maximum credit, you wanna make sure that you enter every EIN for the qualifying employers that you've worked for after October 1st of 2007. The only months that will be considered are months where you have the employment and the loan repayment history. So if your loans have been in repayment for more than 15 years and you've had qualifying employment for more than 15 years, you want to document all of it after October 1st of 2007. You might be one of the people that's already met the 120 qualifying month requirement. You just have to submit the application to find out. Next, you want to make sure that every applicable question is answered. If you use the PSLF help tool, this will be taken care of for you. If you decide to, try and be brave and just download the blank paper application and fill it out, you're increasing the odds of making a mistake and answering questions that don't apply to you or skipping questions that do apply to you. So if you can, please use the PSLF help tool, which is online. It's studentaid.gov/PSLF. Also, about the form. After you complete the PSLF help tool piece of the form, it's going to give you a PDF to download. When you download that PDF, you're going to see that the first page of the application is there for you as the borrower to sign. The subsequent pages, there will be one for each employer that you've entered. Those pages are for the employer to sign. After the employer signs it, they can give it back to you and you submit your application to Mohila. I want you to double check all of those employment certification forms to make sure that the signatures are hand drawn, because digital signatures, as in like typing your name in a fancy font, those will not be accepted. The signature has to be hand drawn. It could be hand drawn with a fingertip or a stylus, on the computer, or it could be a wet signature. But what it cannot be is typed. That will not be accepted. So you make sure that you sign your application the right way. Once you get your forms back from your employer, you make sure that they signed it the right way, and then you submit it to Mohila. As for what this looks like after you submit the applications, I'm going to be honest with you, it's probably going to take a long time. The application itself will tell you, or at least when you complete the help tool piece, you'll be told that it could take 120 days for you to receive a qualifying payment count. In some cases, it might take longer. A lot of that has to do with the fact that there was one servicer for PSLF up until summer of this year. That company is exiting the business. They're transitioning everything over to another company called Mohila. And during that transition, there are just some growing pains that are being worked through. And that has led to people experiencing longer wait times on phone calls, waiting for qualifying payment counts. Everything is just taking longer. Even though the wait is long, the potential benefit is huge. So if you are in the midst of this process, I would just tell you to be patient. Advocate for yourself where you feel it's necessary, but be patient. It's taking a long time for everybody, and eventually it will be sorted through. But the important thing is, get your application in before October 31st. So make sure that you complete that PSLF help tool piece before October 31st. And if you have to consolidate, get that application in before October 31st as well, because after October 31st, the waiver will expire and the old rules will go back into effect. All right. So I actually want to pause because I'm seeing that we have about 20 minutes left. The next set of content that I have has to do directly with the book. And these are strategies to combat each of the outcomes that I highlighted. But since we are in such a sensitive period right now with the limited PSLF waiver, and we also have just had the release of the application for the Biden-Harris Student Relief Plan, I just wanted to pause and take some questions first. If there are people who are current students, I can get through this content too, but I just really want to make sure that we're able to address the questions that might have come up about these student loan relief options that are time sensitive.
Dr. Canady, we don't have any questions right now in the chat.
Okay.
But we can take a second for folks to type them in.
Okay, because I know that was a lot of information that I gave. So we'll just hold on for a moment to see if there are any questions that are come up about the Biden-Harris Student Relief Plan, Student Debt Relief Plan, or Public Service Loan Forgiveness.
And just as a reminder for everyone, the recording will be provided to all attendees. And the recording will include both the slide deck and the chat area. Don't see any questions so far.
All right, then we will blaze ahead. Something just popped up. Okay.
It was a thank you.
Oh, a thank you. Oh, you're welcome. That made it easy. Okay. So, as for strategies to increase the ROI.
Actually, one question just popped up. It says, what is the website to apply?
Okay, I'm typing it in the chat right now. It's studentaid.gov/debt relief. And if you go there, you should be able to get to the application. There's another link that they've given. I'm going to type that one too, just in case it's more direct. /debt, let's say -relief. All right, I want to check that one. But you should be able to get to it by going to studentaid.gov/debt relief. Here's another one to try that might take you straight to the application. Let me make sure. Yep. The second one will take you directly to the application. And you are welcome. And that application is available. It's set to be available until December 31st of next year. But again, I would encourage you, get your application in ASAP if you have not applied already. There are just, lots of things going on in this space. There's some lawsuits. We're coming up on midterms. I don't know how all of that will fit together to affect this plan, but I would just rather have my name on the rolls, as my grandma used to say, have my name on the rolls early on instead of trying to play catch up, if something were to happen to disrupt this, okay? All right, so if we don't have any questions, I will head into the content that's really geared more toward current students. So the first stat that I gave was about Black borrowers and borrowing more. So the first strategy I wanted to give is to just make sure that you're tapping all of your resources. When it comes to paying for higher education, the FAFSA is truly the gateway to all forms of aid. Even though the FAFSA is a federal form, it's also used by most schools to determine eligibility for institutional forms of financial aid, which could be loans with better terms or scholarships and grants. Sometimes it's also used by states to assess a student's eligibility for state scholarships and grant programs. But if you don't fill out the FAFSA, you might not be able to access those programs. The FAFSA for the 2023-2024 academic year became available on October 1st. It's also good to complete it early because there are some aid programs that are limited to people who complete the FAFSA by a certain date. And also just completing it early can give you a chance to correct any errors that might arise. If you do have to take if you do have to take student loans, it is preferable to exhaust your federal student loan eligibility first, because with the federal government, you have access to benefits such as public service loan forgiveness and cancellation through the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. Also, when you borrow with private lenders, you're subject to their terms and conditions, which can change. With the federal government, the terms of loans, they're stated up front, and every borrower's loans have the same terms. It's not that way when you leave the federal government and go to private lenders. Also, with the state level, for DC, it's the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. They have several higher education initiatives, and you might be able to find some opportunities out there for funding higher ed. DC also has a student loan ombudsman, Ricardo Jefferson, who is a Howard University Law School alum. So make sure that you're checking your state or district resources for student loan borrowers and financial aid. For the institution, there is no way around this. The FAFSA ends up at your school. The school is going to use the information on that FAFSA to develop an offer for you that includes many financial aid components. Some of it might be gift aid that doesn't have to be repaid. Some of it comes from loans, but that information will come to you from the institution. So make sure that you are in touch with the Office of Financial Aid, and don't just contact them when you're looking for your refund check or something. Just reach out just to say hello. Sometimes you never know if additional scholarships might pop up, and somebody might remember to give you a nudge about applying because of that interaction with you. Also, your community, organizations like fraternities and sororities, places of worship, extracurricular activities such as sports groups. Sometimes these groups might offer scholarships, and by participating in those groups or being connected to them, you might be able to access them. In some rare circumstances, there may be some headlines and hashtags that are specifically geared towards student loan borrowers and providing repayment assistance. If you are still in school and your income or your household's income has declined, you want to make sure that you reach out to the financial aid office and let them know, so that if the change is significant enough, they can reevaluate your financial aid package. And if the income decline was severe enough, you might be eligible for additional forms of aid that do not have to be repaid. And lastly, when it comes to student loans, do not borrow the maximum amount just because it's available. The amount of student loans offered is based on each school's cost of attendance. That cost of attendance is an estimate of how much the school believes it would cost a student to attend for 1 year. If you know that your personal cost of attendance is lower, then don't borrow all of the loans just because they're offered. The loan situation, the branding of it is just so interesting to me, and how someone can get a refund check, but the refund check is actually from a loan. It's not a refund, it's a debt that has to be repaid. So just remember that when you're considering what types of aid to accept, specifically how much you accept in the form of student loans. So our next set of strategies, borrowing less often. This first one is consider the shortest pathway to your desired degree or credential. I don't know about you all, but my path was kind of a windy one. And as a result of the twists and turns, it ended up costing more money, definitely beyond the full scholarship that I entered school on. So when you're thinking about completion, you want to do that in the most efficient way that's possible, because there are no A's for effort. You don't get free courses when you're repeating a course just because you tried it the first time. Every attempt will cost money. So you just want to make sure that you follow the course sequence for your major as closely as possible, and as you do things to just get you on the path towards success and completing it, ideally in the shortest amount of time and at the lowest cost possible. This last one here, try your best to pass each class the first time. I know that this sounds like, one of those things like, duh, who doesn't do that? I'm not saying that people don't try to pass a class, like they're not paying attention or studying. It's just that sometimes you have priorities that have to be balanced. So for people that might be working while in school, if you're picking up extra shifts, don't ignore how putting that extra time in at work can take away from your efforts in the classroom, or cause you not to be able to get as much rest as you need to pay attention and be focused in the classroom. This is really thinking about priorities. And if you have too much on your plate, to be able to give your best effort at passing these classes the first time that you take them. So next is increasing your odds of graduating. First one is pay your semester bill on time. This is not because I'm on the side of the school and I want them to get your money as soon as possible. This is because if you don't pay your semester bill on time, some schools have a policy to drop you from the class. So if you lose your seat and you have to sort through financial issues to figure out if you can reclaim that seat, by that time, there might not be a seat left in that class. And then your course sequence is thrown off. And perhaps you have to take classes over a special term or in the summer. So paying your semester bill on time is something that works to ensure continuity. It makes sure that you're ready for class on day one, and you don't have to divert your attention toward financial aid or figuring out how you're going to pay a bill, and thus taking away from the time and attention you can pay to your studies. The next step is taking some time to learn about how you learn best. There is a self-assessment available at educationplanner.org that really helps people figure out their best learning methods. This was something I wish I had found before I went to college, because the way that some of those classes, especially in the first year, were delivered to me, just wasn't compatible with how I learned best. So once I learned my model, my grades definitely improved. Next is to focus on building some social capital with your classmates, as well as faculty and staff. I know sometimes students have a hard time figuring out what to say, to a professor, how to introduce yourself. But there are some ways that you can make an impression without making a formal introduction. You can show good posture, sit up straight, and at least act like you're listening. Give some eye contact. Practice some of those active listening moves, like nodding a head or a pondering look on your face, or asking a question. These are the things that can cause you to be remembered for good reasons. So if you're not sure about what to say to make an introduction, I can tell you from my experience as a faculty member, your behavior will set you apart. And if you're doing things differently from other people in a good way, your professors will remember you, and with good reason. They'll also, some of them might look out for you. If there's an internship available, they might give you a nudge to apply or give you a recommendation. The focus again here is to build social capital that can help you achieve success. As for earning more after graduation, you've got to do some research. The Campus Career Services Office is a great place to start. Many times they are tracking job placements and compensation for graduates, and they can share that information with you so that you have a better idea of what's happening in the workplace. And when you are entertaining offers, you can see what is unreasonably low, or if your expectations are unreasonably high, and you can come back to the center. You can also conduct your own free research. The Bureau of Labor Statistics is a great place to start. You can look at employment trends in different regions, depending on where you might want to live after graduation, different roles, see the education that's required, as well as the compensation that's being offered for those positions. I'd also say combine that kind of high-level research with people that you know who might work in that space. Tap your personal network, friends of friends, family members, your professors even, and ask them about what they're seeing in the fields. And you can combine the high-level information from places like the Bureau of Labor Statistics with what's happening on an individual basis with the people around you. Also, when it comes to evaluating earnings, don't stop with salary. You got to consider total compensation. This is one of the ones that people, I think, shift towards later in life because they're thinking about how those benefits, the value of those benefits, such as maybe having access to a gym, free parking, childcare, healthcare. Those things tend to become more important a bit later in life. And those things could actually make a job with a lower salary more valuable because of the added value of those associated benefits. So don't just focus on the salary. Think about the entire package, salary and benefits. And then lastly, strategies to steer clear of student loan default. Right now, we've been in this CARES Act forbearance for more than 2.5 years. So for many people, student loan payments have not been a concern, but that payment pause is set to end December 31st of this year. When the payment pause ends, please make sure you exercise your right to choose a feasible repayment plan. If you're currently in school, you don't have to choose a plan until you're getting out of school. But when it's your chance to choose, exercise your right. Because if you don't choose, you'll be placed into the standard plan. And the standard plan for many people is one that is not feasible. It's often the most expensive one on a monthly basis. And if you can't make that payment, you might find yourself in default and experiencing those severe consequences. You want to make sure that you stay in touch with your student loan servicer. You can go to studentaid.gov to find out who your servicers are and make sure that you have updated information on file so that they can reach you if they need to. And the last tip is to maximize loan forgiveness and cancellation benefits. Public service loan forgiveness is the targeted program that I touched on today, but this list should also include the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan and submitting that application as soon as possible. Additionally, some state governments have loan repayment assistance programs, and employers are beginning to offer benefits that are designed for student loan borrowers as well. The point with many of these tips is that it's a combination of things that will help you achieve success and access resources that can support you on your repayment journey. But you have to look for these things and apply for these things in order to reap the benefits. So research, apply, and access. For closing thoughts, I just wanted to share some resources with you. One is the Office of Federal Student Aid at studentaid.gov. That's where you can go to complete the application for the Biden-Harris Student Debt Relief Plan. Also, public service loan forgiveness. You can look at your loans. You can consolidate if you want to. You can also review different repayment plans that are available. Another organization is a nonprofit organization I started, the Maryland Center for Collegiate Financial Wellness. Our website is mccfw.org, and we have a page that's dedicated to public service loan forgiveness and a limited waiver. For DC residents, I encourage you to visit the website of the DC Student Loan Ombudsman. You can find him at disb.dc.gov. And for those of you that are applying for public service loan forgiveness, these two following resources are worth looking at. One of them is called the PSLF Megathread on Reddit. I recommend visiting this site if you're applying for PSLF, because although I've given you some content about what PSLF looks like in theory, the actual experience of people who are applying for this and waiting for a word right now, it's important to have that to balance out the theory piece. So if you want to know what wait times are that people are experiencing, pitfalls in the application process, altogether timelines from consolidating to applying to PSLF to having the debt finally forgiven, you can find that straight from a group of people who are just sharing their real life experiences. So that's on Reddit, and it's the PSLF Megathread. And also there's one other organization, a DC-based organization called the Student Borrower Protection Center. And they have created a website called forgivemystudentdebt.org that has much information about public service loan forgiveness and student loan debt cancellation. So thank you all so much for joining me on this Thursday afternoon, again, of homecoming week. You can contact me through social media on Facebook. I'm Dr. Tisa Silver Canady, Twitter and Instagram at Tisa Silver, or by email at asktisa@gmail.com. I'm also available for one-on-one counseling through the DC SBDC Lead Center at Howard University. And my book, Borrowing While Black, is available for purchase on Amazon and tisasilver.com. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Canady. Great information. I encourage everyone, if you have questions, I know there's a lot of information to take in, but definitely check with her and follow up. As she mentioned, she is available for counseling about this subject matter through the DCSBDC. So I encourage everyone to follow up on that.